What's up, everybody? Good late morning, and I know this is kind of old news at this point. This has been punched in for a couple of days now, and actually, most of this has been known for a very, very long time because NFL schedules are largely determined in advance. Well, in terms of the opponent, you don't know the actual order, you don't know the times, you don't know the primetime games, but most of your opponents for a given NFL season are known well in advance. But with the results on Sunday, we were able to find out exactly who the Seahawks would be playing in 2025. And most people have already seen this, most people are already aware of this. But let's go ahead and take a look at the Seattle Seahawks 2025 opponents list. So 17 games. I think we all pretty familiar with the 17 game season now. And let's break down a few things here. Let's just first blush try to understand what we're dealing with here. You've got 6 games against divisional opponents. Everybody knows that. There's not much to say there. Now, what is this division going to be next year? That's really hard to know. It's really hard to judge what the Rams are going to be because you don't know if Stafford's going to retire. You don't know if McVay's going to call it quits if Stafford retires. There's some things that can happen with the Rams that could swing it one way or the other. What if Cooper Kupp hits the wall here? He's already arguably starting to kind of sort of bang up against the wall. So hard to know what's going on there. The Niners, they might have to kind of duck and cover here for a season. They might have to take a step back here and just accept that their window is closed and they need to try to open up a new one, or they could just go all the way in. And it's really hard to know what the right decision is. Like couple of months ago, I would have said you got to give Brock Purdy whatever he wants at this point. Now I'm not convinced they do. His play really deteriorated as the season went on. And the Cardinals, they were about an average team this year. Can they take the next step in 2025? Again, that's really, really hard to know. So it doesn't seem like it's going to be a great division, but there is potential for all 3 teams to go one way or the other, it feels like. So it's not a situation where we're looking at our division and we're dealing with teams like the Packers, who you know are going to be good, a team like the Lions that you know is going to be good. It's more like it could be good, could be bad, and there's just way too much that we don't know. So the division doesn't seem scary. Now, the home opponents, and remember, this year we have 8 home games, 9 road games, which is not necessarily a bad thing with the way this team has played at home lately, but the home opponents are the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, the New Orleans Saints, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Minnesota Vikings. So, Texans, you got to figure they're going to spend this offseason doing whatever they need to do to fix their offensive line because this is their last chance to make a run with CJ Stroud on a rookie deal. They kind of blew their opportunity to do it this year because they did not give him a real offensive line, kind of like what Seattle's done, right? It's actually very similar in terms of the effect the offensive line has had on the quarterback. And you got to believe that Houston's going to look at this and go, well, maybe Tank Dell misses next season, which would be a big blow. But we gave him receivers. We gave him skill position players. We've got a pretty good defense. We've got the head coach. We've got 1 year left before he probably wants a new contract. So let's go out and build up the offensive line. And if they do that, that should be an elite team. So that's not going to be fun. The Colts, on the other hand, feel like they're just kind of stuck in a washing machine. I'm pretty low on Anthony Richardson at this point as a quarterback. I don't think that situation in Indianapolis is going to give him the opportunity to be the best version of himself. So I would look at the Colts and say that's probably another mediocre team. The Saints, they are probably due to just flush everything out. They never do it. But at the same time, they've never had a season as bad as the season they just had. That was a season where they started out great. They started 2-0, and then they went what 3-2 and I'm sorry, what was it 3-12 over the last 15 games. And some of those games were humiliating, brutal. So this might be a year for the Saints to just take the pain and maybe win 2 or 3 games. And if it happens, it happens. I don't think you can keep kicking the can down the road on the cap stuff forever, especially when you're not producing good results anyway. They need a new coach. Tampa Bay, on the other hand, that's a team that has been really, really dominant at times this year. And maybe the Mike Evans party ends next year. Maybe Chris Godwin doesn't come back from the injury the right way. But Baker Mayfield still in his prime. They got a nice little offensive line. Some stuff is good on that defense. I will say they got some work to do on that side of the ball, but that should be a good team. That's not an easy game. And then the Vikings, they're definitely going to take a step back next year, but it's hard to know how big it's going to be. It could be very small. Are they going to keep Darnold? Are they going to roll with J.J. McCarthy? As long as they have Kevin O'Connell, I think they'll be fine. So that's the home slate. The road slate, to talk about the non-divisional games, we got the Falcons. I don't know. Raheem Morris, I think, has outed himself as being overwhelmed as a head coach, and a mystifying hire that a lot of people thought that it was when the hire was initially made. That defense is so bad, it's hard to believe they can fix it in one off season, because they tried to bring in players. They tried to bring in name brand players, and the results were abominable. So it's hard to believe the Falcons are going to be anything special next year. They should continue to be productive offensively. Penix showed some really good stuff near the end of the season. But overall, I would say Atlanta's on track to be about average next year. Panthers, hard to see them snapping out of their current funk with this ownership. I will say I like Canales, and there is some stuff about that team that encourages you a little bit, but I don't think there's a lot of talent on that defense right now. And I still think there's a little bit of a ceiling on that offense with Bryce Young running the show. I know he showed some good stuff as the season went on, but I still look at that and I go, well, what are you ever going to have a top 5 quarterback in Bryce Young? I don't think so. I think that there's too much stuff that is holding him back. Okay. Jaguars, hard to believe Jacksonville's going to be anything other than a bottom feeder next year. They admittedly, maybe the right coach swoops in there and puts everything in order, but they got to figure out if Trevor Lawrence's brain still works. They got to figure out if a guy like ETN is anything. They got to figure out if their receivers other than Brian Thomas Jr. or anything. They got to figure out so much stuff. I'm not sure that hiring somebody like a Ben Johnson as head coach is just going to immediately turn everything around. So I think Jacksonville will remain a bottom feeder. Titans, same thing. I can't see that team being very good. They're going to be flipping quarterbacks again, and that whatever quarterback they end up with is going to be in a really bad situation. That Titans team is very low on receivers, low on competent offensive line play. Tony Pollard's their one really good playmaker most of the time. So that's probably another bottom feeder team. The Commanders, that's a team that you would expect to take a step forward and maybe even be elite in 2025. They already have the offense. Dan Quinn is there to get a handle on the defense. The defense wasn't even very good this year, and they still won games. So that's a team that you would earmark as taking a step forward. And the Steelers, stuck in a washing machine. Could go one way or the other. Winning in Pittsburgh won't be easy, but I don't know how they snap out of where they are. You look at that team and you're like, okay, they need to do something different at quarterback because both the guys they have aren't any good, but who do they go get that's better? And the answer is probably no one. So do you draft somebody? In this draft, almost certainly not. So do you bring back those guys? I mean, the shines off the apple for both of them as far as I'm concerned already. What do you do? What do you do if you're Pittsburgh? What you do is you still win games because your defense is good and you've got some positive stuff going on the offense to squeeze out at least, 14 to 20 points per game, and sometimes that gets you enough to win, but hard to imagine much more than that. So, tricky game, but not an insurmountable foe. So, the schedule is not too bad. There are some really good teams here. I think Houston, Tampa, maybe Minnesota, Maybe Washington would be your heavy hitters on this schedule. Those would be the teams that I think would maybe be making some kind of a Super Bowl push. Other than that, I think everything else is doable. You'd hope to play Jacksonville and Tennessee late in the season, not early when it's going to be extremely hot, because you're going on the road to play those teams. You don't want to necessarily play Carolina early in the season when it's hot, so monitor that. But it's not a bad schedule, and according to NFL Nerd here on X, it's actually one of the easier schedules in the league by raw strength of schedule, mostly because of the division. But regardless, the strength of schedule for the 2025 Seahawks right now is .474. For reference, in the 2024 season, it was .498, so a little bit better. It was about average. This year, as of right now, it's tied for 21st. Now, that doesn't really mean anything yet because these teams are going to change things a lot in the offseason. But as of right now, it would be fair to say the Seattle Seahawks have an easier than average schedule for the season. Now, if a team like, I don't know, New Orleans goes out there and trades for Josh Allen and Jamar Chase and gets Jamar Chase, and then they get Micah Parsons, then of course you got to reevaluate. But we all know that that's unlikely anyway. And I think our reads on these teams right now are going to be mostly correct, with certainly opportunity for things to swing a little bit one way or the other, maybe in one or two cases a lot. All right, so that's it for the look at the 2025 schedule. It's a schedule that you should be able to feel like you can go for it with. It's not some insurmountable, impossible to climb summit that forces you to consider punting on 2025. Not at all. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks.